us when he comes.
Awake and ready.
And when he asks us to dedicate ourselves ever more perfectly to him, how will he find us?
Awake and ready.
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
Friend, beloved God,
Friend, beloved God,
Great Master,
Great Masters,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
Saints of all religions,
Saints of all religions,
we humbly bow before thee.
we humbly bow before thee.
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
help us
help us
to destroy our ego,
to destroy our ego,
to overcome all resistance,
to overcome all resistance,
all dogmatism, all rigidity
all rigidity
that keeps us stuck
that keeps us stuck
in our little self.
in our little self.
Help us to expand our consciousness,
Help us to expand our consciousness,
to receive your divine grace,
to receive your divine
and
grace,
become your channel
and become your channel,
to share your blessings in this world.
to share your blessings in this world.
Oh, peace.
Peace. Amen. as you listen to these words on our affirmation for this week. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is the sword of victory. When we forgive those who seek to hurt us, we rob them of their very power to do us harm. Better still, if they respond with love, they will unite their strength to ours, and so our strength becomes doubled. But forgiveness should not be given primarily for its effect on others, but rather for the freedom it affirms in our own hearts. Let no outward circumstance condition your inner happiness. Be not pleased merely when man is pleased. Be pleased rather when you feel God's pleasure in your heart. Now let's affirm together first in a strong voice. All that befalls me is for my good.
All that befalls me is for my good.
I welcome any hurts that I receive
I welcome any hurts that I receive
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
Now a little softer. All that befalls me is for my good.
All that befalls me is for my good.
I welcome any hurts that I receive
I welcome any hurts that I receive
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
Now in a whisper, taking it deeper inside. All that befalls me is for my good. I welcome any hurts that I receive as opportunities to grow in understanding. And now silently, broadcasting from the point between the eyebrows, all that befalls me is for my good. I welcome any hurts that I receive as opportunities to grow in understanding. And please pray silently with me. Lord, how often the hurts that I have sustained in life have grieved me. Strengthen my power of love, that I surrender all things to Thee, my eternal friend. Om. Peace. Amen. Good morning, friends. Welcome to Sunday service, and welcome to those joining us online. My name is Dharmadevi, and this is Narayan. And our topic for this week is Dogmatism versus Common Sense. This is from Rays of the One Life, weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Ananda. Truth is one and eternal. Realize a oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7, Jesus warns, "Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them." Jesus here, as indeed many times during his teaching, counsels people to use their God-given common sense and not to rely on high-flown but undemonstrable claims. Common sense goes beyond abstract reason, for it is rooted in actual experience. Even common sense, however, is deficient when the judgment called for goes beyond sensory experience. Ultimately, what he emphasized always, therefore, was intuitive perception. Thus, he expected more of his disciples than crude common sense, and often scolded them for being too literal-minded. As he did elsewhere when they thought his statement, "I have meat to eat that you know not of," meant that he had steaks or sandwiches secreted about his person. His reference, of course, was to spiritual, not material substance. Words, even though appearing in the scriptures, are no substitute for direct perception of truth. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 2nd chapter, "The sage who knows God has as little need for the scriptures as one might have for a pond when the whole land is covered in flood." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om. Om. Om.
Good morning, friends. I want to share the whispers at the end this morning. I was kind of chuckling to myself because that song Keisha just sang was Jim Brown before Ramji and Dakshini, you got here, but our congregation are all white and you know what you are. I was thinking today because we sprung forward and we have a smaller congregation. I really know what it means to preach to the choir because our choir makes up half of our congregation. So I was thinking our congregation is so small. You're preaching to the choir. Anyway, that was going on. I was thinking of another funny experience with dogmatism. You know how Master said, ignorance is 50-50. It gets in there everywhere. And when I was telling my earthly family I was going to leave the East Coast and move to Ananda village, this spiritual community, you can imagine how that went over with a close-knit Italian family. So my father, first like, it's a cult. It was the blatant, more like, let's go that route. And when that didn't work, then my father had to sort of switch strategies. So he was a salesman, so he was always looking for an angle. And so he figured if he couldn't win me with just over emotionalism, he was trying to win me with what was sweet reason to him. And so at one point he said, "Son, all the sinners are here on the East Coast. We need you here." I just chuckled inwardly at that. But this is the first thing that the Master says, to use your common sense is actually a divine gift, right? That God has given to us. And that not to get drawn into these highfalutin philosophies and, the new healer, right? Or the new this and that. But to just come back to judge a tree by its fruit is what Christ is saying. By their fruits you shall know them. And I can tell you from my own experience, the fruit that I have seen from the tree of dedication and discipleship to God and Guru, through people that I have met at Ananda. People that you all have met. I know every one of us here have met Jyotish and Devi and people like Asha and Jaya. And it says, Swami said, if you met one or two people, you could say what they're doing is special. But when you meet a whole group of people, did I get it backwards?
Yeah.
It's when you meet one or two person, you could say they're special. But thank you, Dharmadevi. But when you meet a whole group of people that are like that, it's what they're doing that makes them special. And it's in that simple. See, this is the next step that Swami is sharing here in the reading. It's in the intuitive perception of God. It's in the receiving. So it's not that any one soul is special. We're all potential yogi Christ. We all have that divine radiance within us. It's just some souls have been practicing their receptivity. They've been opening themselves to that light more and more deeply and more intensely. And just like one time somebody wrote to Swami, "Oh, you're so great. You've done this and that, and I'm just a poor Jim Brown, kind of whatever. I'm poor Joe Schmo." And Jyotish was walking with him when they were talking about this letter, and Swami said, "I wish this person could just simply understand that I've just been practicing a little bit longer than they have." It's not helpful for us to put the masters up on a pedestal. We have the altar to remind us, right, of our own higher potential. So it's very, very important for us to, well, here's another something important that I just stumbled upon with Master. When we get into comparing in our lives, I don't know if this has ever happened to you. And actually, Master told this story when he was with Sri Yukteswar. He started to compare their work with another work, and he said, and Sri Yukteswar rebuked him for it, and said, "Why compare our organization to theirs? Theirs is what theirs is. We are what we are. God is playing through you and me in the way that He wants to." And Master said that I realized that I was complaining. And actually to complain, this is an important point that I never thought about it like this. He said to complain is to have a desire. Right? We think of desire, remember, is two-sided. You have attractive desires, you have repulsive desires. So when we complain, it's just a repulsive desire. Never thought about it like that. It's just so simple. So if you find yourself complaining, double down with find something to be grateful for. Try and shift that attitude, immediately. Don't let that. That's it. It's like a little bit of dogmatism that creeps in. Well, this is the way the world should be. Right? And so I have the right to complain about it. All this traffic, all these, Michael's got that same scarf on again. It's a nice scarf, Michael. All this, it's junk. That's why, but how do you clear your mind? That's why Lahiri said you need to clear your mind of the mental debris through the living water. Right? The living water of God's presence. That's the intuitive perception. Therein lies the beauty of yoga, Kriya Yoga, and these techniques, which we're not saying practice Kriya Yoga, you need to know. But what does Krishna say? My gosh. What does Krishna say at the end of the Gita? After he expounds this great transcendental wisdom. At the very end, he says to Arjuna, "Do as you feel." He doesn't impose, right? God and Divine Mother don't impose. Do as you feel. That's why Master said, what comes of itself, let it come. Don't impose. This is what happens, right? Well, rather than say, do as you feel, we say, you're going to do what I will, right? We try to impose our will upon the world. No, it doesn't work like that. What we need to learn, well, yesterday was Sri Yukteswar's Mahasamadhi. Let's take a page out of his book of wisdom. Learn to behave. Right? What he's saying is, learn to attune yourself to that stream, to that flow of divine grace. One of our friends said, she just has felt this downpouring of gratitude in her life. And there are times where she felt like buckets of grace were being poured on her. There is a torrential downpour of divine grace. We have blocked ourselves off from it. And so the way to return to it is just to, what am I grateful for? How can I serve you? How can I love you? How can I just try and live one moment at a time, supremely well? Not to get we all get strung out, right? When you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, do you ever feel that in life? It's because we string ourselves out. We think, oh, we get all this stuff I've done, all the things I'm carrying from the past, or oh my God, all the preoccupation and worry and fear for the future. We can let that go and just focus right here and right now on the intuitive perception of God within you. But see, this is why the saints, they wait for you to come. When you're ready, when your thirst is so strong, you remember that story of the young man that went to the guru down by the Ganges, and he said, I want to be your disciple. Many of you probably know this story, and the guru took the young man and he dunked his head under the water for a minute or more, and he began to flail, and then all of a sudden he picked his head up and he said, what did you want more than anything else? Air. And the guru said, well, come back when you want God that much. Now, there is a beautiful follow-up to that Jyotish just told in his blog. It was so beautiful, it was so touching. He said the rest of the story. He said, I'd like to think that this young man, Ananda, this is what happened to him in the rest of his life. That he then went on, he got married, he had children, he became very successful, had more wealth than he could use. But then the years went by, his children went abroad, his wife passed away, and that remembrance of that yearning for God came back to him. And he tried, and then he remembered that saint. And he said, I wonder where that saint is. And he went back, and he had heard when he went back to the Ganges in Varanasi where he had met this saint, he had heard that he had a great reputation for healing, that his dhoti would always remain wet, even in the hot Indian sun. And he actually came back to that very spot where he met that saint. And there he was again. And he was as radiant, looked like he hadn't even aged from when he had met him many years ago. And he went up to him and said, you probably don't remember me, but I came to you as a youth. And the saint began to, tears came down his face. He said, oh, my son, I remember you. I've been praying every day that you would come back to me. And he said, then this man, Ananda, is now an older man. He said, I realize now that I do want God more than anything else. He said, you can hold my head under the water now, and you can hold me till I die. And the saint said, well, what good would that do? He said, you would just die and come back again. He said, I'm here now to help you destroy your ego. He said, and you see that this Ganges is symbolic of the river, of the flow of divine grace in your own spine. And through the sacred key of Kriya Yoga, I will teach you how to awaken to that flow of living water so that you can achieve final liberation. And so he became his disciple. You know, it's our story. It's that we have to, the washings and regenerations, right, that the Bible talks about. We have to rinse, cleanse, repeat. You know, the whole spiritual path is this process of self-purification. And that the more that we dive into that river of the divine. It's like we were celebrating last night, Shivaratri. You see the Shiva lingams and they have water that they'll pour on them. That's symbolic of that flow of divine grace. The more that we get in tune with that, the more that we feel it washing over us. And I wanted to close with a brief story in the Whispers. There was another story of, speaking of the Ganges in Varanasi, of a saint. And he was a Danda Swami. The Swamis in India that go around with a staff that reminds them of their spine. And he got to this point, like this young man, that he wanted nothing more than God. But he even felt just that little fancy frozen boundary of even being a part of this Swami order, right? Like Vivekananda said, it's a blessing to be born in a religion, but a curse to die in one. That you need to like roam and roam. You need to expand out of it, even. And so he got to this point where he just said, he went down to the Ganges and symbolically took his danda, he took his staff, and he threw it into the Ganges. And then he realized that he couldn't go back to his ashram and to his Swami order. And so for the first time he realized he was, in essence, homeless, right? A true wandering ascetic. And he had nothing and no one. And so he sat to meditate by the Ganges, and then he got up. It was very late at night, 2 or 3 a.m., and he began to walk. And if you've been to Varanasi, but they have actually cremation ghats there. One of the biggest ones probably in India and the world, the Manikarnika Ghat, where the dhuni or the fire there has been burning for thousands of years, and it's purported to be started by Shiva. But anyway, so he was walking by this big cremation ghat, and he saw this, what seemed to be like one of the untouchables that was moving the bones and going through them, and he said he just kind of kept walking, didn't want to pay attention to him, and all of a sudden this man turned to him and said, he said, I see you, I'm going to pollute you. And he's like, this man's crazy. And so the monk just started running away from him. He said, he said, I'll get you. And all of a sudden these 2, 3 mongrels, these dogs started chasing after him too. And he was he was fear beyond belief. And he felt the dogs getting ready to catch up to him. And then all of a sudden, he tripped, he fell, he cut himself. And he just was cowering on the ground in fear. And then all of a sudden, he heard this voice. Om Namo Narayan. And it was this melodic voice. And he turned and he saw, and it was Babaji. And he said, my son, it's I who have conjured up all of this. He said, you threw your danda staff away, but still your heart carried that impurity of high class and low class, of clean and unclean. He said, now I will initiate you into Kriya Yoga, where you will receive this silent stream of grace and achieve freedom. Let's close with this whispers together. I invite you to close your eyes and take this inwardly. Make me silent that I may eloquently converse with thee. Wandering through forests of incessant searching, I arrived at the mystery door which conceals thy presence. I knocked loudly on this door of silence with persistent blows of faith. At last the door opened, and I beheld thee resting on thy altar of glorious visions. I stood with restless gaze, waiting for thee to speak. Thy creation-making voice was inaudible. At last, a deep stillness stole upon me and taught me in whispers the language of angels. With the lisping voice of my new-born freedom, I tried to speak. Suddenly, the lights in thy temple wrote brilliantly in letters of light. In my little chamber of quietness, I am ever at rest. I never speak now, but with the voice of silence. Through my silence, O divine lover, converse thou eloquently with me.